Well,
Oh,
hopefully in today's discussion, we will get to iron through some of those wrinkles and see what we missed. Because for this week's Thinker Growth Workshop, for number one, we're missing the grand poobah of the Thinker Growth community. Jason is not with us today. He is off teaching a course on entrepreneurship to local high school students. And so he has taken the immense risk of leaving the discussion in the hands of us three, which
oh, oh, quite the
perhaps,
mistake.
yeah, perhaps it's, for all his normally good business acumen and judgment has suddenly gone out the window. But we're going to make the best of it. I'm Paul Edwards. I'm joined by Ryan Gard. How do I pronounce your last name? Gard?
Yep, you said it right.
Okay. And Naomi Alstrom. And so we are tackling the topic today of envy. And I want to start out by framing this a little bit because I think the picture most people have of envy is sort of a sneering contempt for what other people have or who other people are. And that is one strain of it.
It is a
But it's
deadly sin.
it is a deadly sin. It is, but it's actually a little bit broader than that. It has been my experience, and I'm going to be curious to hear what you two think of it as well. Um, I'll share how it's worked for me, and then maybe you have another angle which I haven't thought of. But first of all, it definitely does include a contempt for another person or another person's success or what another person has. Here's how it's played out for me, though. I am not the type of person to get, uh, to seethe with contempt that someone else is doing well. I like seeing other people do well. The way this works for me is I don't like seeing other people do well when I'm not doing well. And so the tendency I then have is to pile shame and contempt upon myself for not doing as well as someone else does. Now, I say this from a position significantly recovered from it. I'm just describing to you how I naturally gravitate when I don't do the inner work, right? But what I wanted to throw out there today with both of you is to say, has this been a problem for you outbound? And here's the other category. You may not wrestle with it at all, but you may have experienced it coming on you from others. And we need to have a conversation about that as well to say, okay, if we're not dealing with it ourselves, if our um, downward spirals are in other categories, but not in this one, we still have to be cognizant and vigilant against it coming against us from other people. So that's the broad 30,000-foot description. And Ryan, we're going to be courteous to Naomi and do ladies first here and see what she has to say about envy. So go ahead, take it away, Naomi.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So, were you wanting it in like more of like a business sense or a personal front, or
Uh,
is
I
there
think
like a
it's I think business is a great arena because right, what are we fed nonstop by the whole marketplace guru industry, right? You can have this life, and if you're not achieving this life, then you're nothing, right? And they like to pile it on that way. So I think it's a great context. Yeah.
okay? Yeah, I think as far as envy goes, I really, in comparison, something that I've noticed is I'm like you. I like to see other people succeed, and that's never really been a struggle for me. Um, but I don't necessarily compare my failure to other people's success and feel like I'm not doing enough. But where my envy comes in is where my success isn't happening as quickly as I think other people's are. And something that I've noticed when I'm doing comparison, but when you take down like um the whole wizard behind the curtain thing in The Wizard of Oz, when you take all that down, a lot of marketing, a lot of advertising, people showing themselves in a light that is more um boosted than reality. And I think that as I've as I've been kind of pushing forward and working on different things and working on different projects, I've noticed that I kind of you end up going where you project. And when I compare, it's usually comparing where I feel I'm at with where people are projecting they're wanting to be at. And so that comparison, it's not an authentic comparison. I think a lot of times when I compare, it's not an authentic comparison. So then I have to dial it back because people, like I said, when they're marketing, it's a projection. It's like a kind of fake it till you make it, but also you need to come across as stronger than where you're at,
Hmm.
because you need to make sure that you give that presence. It's like one of the I was reading Jordan Peterson's book, 12 Rules of Life. One of the things he said is stand up straight. You need to look like a winner. You need to feel like a winner. You need to walk tall and strong and come at it from a success point. And I think that's a lot of times when we're advertising and when other people are advertising and when there's something to compare ourselves to, I feel like usually I'm noticing that I'm comparing again where I feel like I'm at with where they are either projecting themselves to be out or they're trying to have that stronger presence. And that might not be my perception of where they're at is probably very different than where they're actually at. And I'm
Hmm.
probably doing okay. And so I usually dial it back in my head. I have to dial it back a bit.
Hmm. Ryan, what do you say?
It's funny because I was just talking about something like this, while researching a business that I kind of want to start. I've been looking into social media marketing for real estate agents over the weekend, and I have a couple of friends that are real estate agents, and their big thing was that they want to get to a place where they're easily identified as someone that knows what they're doing in the industry. And the way
Hmm.
other real estate agents do that, are similar to like what you would find with like marketing gurus. They're out there like putting out these posts about how well they're doing and you can do this too, blah, 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 trying to provide value in these posts, but then also show how successful they are. And so I've found, at least in my short time researching this business, is that in a game like real estate, where it's a lot of flash and a lot of show, there are people there who, on both ends, are envious of each other with regards to like, I want to do as well as this person shows themselves doing as well, right? Like, oh, this guy really looks like he knows what he's talking about. He looks successful. So I want to do that too. Or I'm going to ask that person about their opinion on this, considering like the vertical or the industry that they're in. So it was funny that we're talking about it now because most of the vibe that I got from the conversation that I had was that kind of like of envy. Like we're seeing these other agents or these other entities online putting out this persona, and we want to be seen that way as well. So how do we do that? And I thought that was
Hmm.
really interesting.
Hmm. Hmm. So what I'm hearing from both of you, and it's the same, it's been the same struggle for me, is we're dealing A with distorted images of ourselves and B with distorted images of others. It's like we're out of focus no matter what we're looking at. And one of the more difficult things to do, particularly with yourself, because you're like, how could I not know my own situation, right? How could I misperceive myself? It's actually quite easy. It's very easy to misperceive yourself. Um, and I think I go back to some of the conversations Jason and I have been having recently with clients at Emissary have been very rewarding and illuminating because most of the time, the clients that we're really after, that at some point in the conversation, they end up saying something to the effect of, I'm not doing this for the money. It's got to make sense on paper. I don't want it to be a losing investment, but I'm not doing this to get rich or to try and make a name for myself. Um, they've in some way, shape, or form, maybe not completely, but they've reached a point where they realize they see through that kind of thing, right? They're like, yeah, no, it's not just with the image that you project online or through the media or whatever. It's also about genuinely understanding who you are. And both Jason and I have found that, you can make all kinds of money and still have a very stunted or stilted view of yourself and of others. So, um, let's talk a little bit about what that looks like. And I'll start with my own example. Having a stunted view of myself, having a, it's off course just a little bit. I can see what my life looks like on a on a daily basis. I can see what my numbers look like on a daily basis. I can read the tea leaves. I can read the language on the paper, but that doesn't always mean I know what it means. Um, so as an example of this, um, when I was, when I was, as Jason and I have been moving into this season where we're now onboarding like 3 or 4 authors, plus possibly a few more before the year is out, I'm re-examining um, the fees I'm charging to do editing and writing and freelance work, as well as, in a situation where we do a full extract and we ghostwrite a book for an author. And I'm beginning to understand that there's more to that than simply the cost of delivering the service, right? There's a perceived value to the client, but there also has to be a perceived value for me. And so that's one of the ways, right? If we're going to talk about it in a business context, that's just one of the ways I've been misperceiving myself. And in a way, I've been undervaluing myself because because I've been in this place for so long where I felt like I have to just lowball it just to get somebody to say yes. And well, what does that do to you subconsciously? What do you begin to take on when you adopt that posture? Well, you begin to take on a negative self image. And then the feedback loop comes around, right? Jason was talking in the Slack channel. He's talking about how our brains abhor an open loop. And so we need resolution to it. The feedback loop comes around. You come across a competitor or you come across just somebody in business who's doing way, way better than you through numbers, through the image they project. And it stacks on top of that. It's like a negative compounding effect. Is what I'm saying making sense? I
Yeah.
realize I'm talking abstract here, but what ends up
Actually,
go ahead, Naomi.
I have an example that actually kind of goes along with that. Before we moved out here, we sold my husband's truck when we moved from Utah to Florida. And we wanted to make sure we sold it quickly. So we looked at the price on Kelly Blue Book and we put it like it was in pretty good condition and we put it on the lower end so that way someone could afford it and snatch it up quickly. And we got very few bites on it. We got very few people reaching out and saying, "Hey, I want to get it." We had a few people who were like, "Oh, can I slash that price in half?" And they wanted a really low ball number. And then when it came down to it, um, we ended up upping the price by a few thousand, and then people talked down the price to over what we had originally listed it for. And that was a good
Mm,
deal to them. And we got many, many more people interested when it was valued higher because they weren't questioning what was wrong with it. They weren't questioning whether or not it was something that was going to work in the long run, whether or not we were hiding something shady about it. They felt like they were getting a good deal. And then when they talked it down again to a price that was over what we were originally asking for, they felt like they were walking away with a steal.
mm,
And I know they say like there's a lot to be
Perceived
said for
value.
yeah, perceived value is huge. And I think a lot of times like we we want to lowball those numbers because we're like, oh well, we want people to afford it. Oh, we how much is my service actually worth? People value things that are higher value.
Yeah.
People value things that are higher value. And I don't know, that was kind of the thing that came into my mind as you were talking.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think to kind of add to that, if you take something like a cell phone, for example, right? How do you perceive value on a cell phone as a product? There are a lot of ways to do that, but one of the ways that like say Apple does consistently is the way it's priced.
Mm,
Like in the sense that, they like the iPhone 15, they've created 4 different versions of that iPhone, each of which is over $500. And why do they do that? Because if they priced a cell phone like that under $500, it would go into the realm of like maybe your Huawei cell phones or like your budget cell phones, Metro PCS, if you know what that is.
Yep.
And there is a distinct resistance to those type of products because the value is perceived lower. For example, a lot of people like iPhones because and they're perceived of higher value because they're heavy, because they're made of metal. Versus if you had a phone that was like more plastic and felt lighter, it feels cheap. Am I right? And I think that also translates to business, and especially if you're running your own business as an owner or a self-employed person, you have to price yourself in a way that's going to show value. Like
Mhm.
when people tell you they can't give away things for free, it's because there's no value. They don't see, no one sees the value on what that free thing is, right? But if you add, say, the value that's comparable in the market or competitive in the market, that's when people will see that value and think think that product is valuable. Kind of how I see it.
Yeah. And the mechanism often by which this is done, it's what it I think that's a little bit easier to illustrate with a product because yeah, I mean, here's my iPhone and I can feel that it's heavier than a plastic cheapy phone I could get at Walmart. And not only that, but I mean, it actually I'm a technological dunce. And so this is extremely useful to me because if I can't figure out how to do something, it makes it easy for me to figure out how to do it, relatively speaking, right? Um, so the value in my mind is very perceptible there. But then you let's cross over into the service place, which is, to some degree where both Naomi and I are more oriented. You're working more in the product sector, Ryan, but you're going to have to create perceived value with what you're doing there too. But when you're talking about creating perceived value based on the knowledge and your execution of a strategy and how you approach dealing with people, one of the things I found very helpful from working with Jason is that we're finding you've got to keep escalating the quality of the conversations you have with people because that's the spiritual equivalent of using metal versus using plastic, right? It's in how you interact with a potential author. And I can see so much like between this time last year, so what we're recording this here in September of 23. If I look back to sales conversations I was having in September of 22, you know, um, to borrow a Trump phrase, total disasters. Everyone agrees, believe me, right? Um, they were. I mean, I don't have to go back and look at the recordings to tell you I was betraying my lower value, my decreased sense of self-worth by the conversations I was having. And then I look at how we talk to clients now and I say, "Oh wow, yeah, we're putting a premium on what we do." And people are buying into it because they're saying, we're having very direct and forthright conversations with them. In many cases, telling them, "You're not a fit for what we do." And what do you mean I'm not a fit for what you do? Well, you just want to write a book. You can do that for free. Set aside 30 minutes a day and tap on your keyboard. You don't need us, right? You need us if you want to become a successful published author. That's different from writing a book. So that's my experience. Naomi, anything to add to that?
Um, I think when I think of like service and valuing service, I've often looked at I really like what you said about the it needs to be higher. Every conversation needs to be higher. And when I look at valuing service, I look at what other people are charging and I see what experience they have and I kind of value accordingly. But I also like there's something to be said for at least for me, I fake confidence. Does that make sense? Like
Mhm.
this and this is where my acting experience comes in handy because I have severe imposter syndrome. I never feel like I belong. I never feel like I have value in a conversation. I feel like, you know what? Everyone is smarter than me. Everyone.
Mhm.
And so I take criticism very seriously and I take it to heart and I'm like, "Okay, how can I alter what I'm doing? How can I change? How can I?" And that's led me down some really toxic situations with people who want to take advantage of that and because I'm very malleable. And so I've
Mhm.
had to create boundaries and kind of put on this persona of this is who I am. This is what I provide. This is where I'm at. This is what you can expect from me. And I have to put on this like fake confidence so that way I don't come across as easily malleable. Um, and that way it's and putting on that fake confidence also helps me put on the value that I would so I have to like put on this character, right? This character of um okay, I'm this person, I'm taking on this persona. This person would be worth this much. It's kind of like I have to put on a character that's outside of myself because I don't because of that imposter syndrome, I have to like create this character that I want to put on when I'm in that moment and in that
Mhm.
headspace. Like when I'm and that helps me put up the front that I need in order to get the job done because I know I can, but I don't feel like I belong in that headspace. So I have to make it separate from myself, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And then I can
Mhm.
value it.
Is this does this strategy feel authentic even though there's a sliver of, shape shifting going on?
Yes.
Does that feel like you're compensating by doing that, or does that feel like something that you're good at doing that is beneficial and helpful to everyone concerned? I'm curious.
Um, Both. So I feel like and this is something too, is when I first started adapting this kind of method, I pride myself on authenticity. I want people to feel safe with me, and with that comes extreme transparency. But I have often been accused of oversharing. And so I've had to make sure that when I'm in that mode, I make sure that my listening is on more than my talking. And I am, instead of asking to self reflect in a way that comes across as like me asking permission, I come across in a more bold sense because oftentimes this is something that took me a long time to learn is people want to be told what to do.
Mhm.
People want to be told what to do. And if they're coming to you for advice, if you're coming at it with that, oh, I'm not sure, they're not going to have much trust in you. And if I want people to have trust and faith in me and have that confidence in me, I need to come at it from a front of here's where I'm at. So it's more of like the fakeness that comes with it, the persona that I have, the this character. The biggest thing that I'm putting on is confidence and boldness,
Mhm.
and less asking permission. Like I was a choir director in my old church congregation and when we were looking at different points to go over in the music, I was like, "Oh, is it okay if we go over this right here? Oh, is it okay?
Mhm.
Are you guys okay if we go over it?" Like I was asking permission, whereas, "Oh, let's do this, let's do this." That wouldn't have seemed bossy, but to me, I I wanted to make sure that no one felt like I was stepping on their toes. But people
Yeah.
want to be told what to do. And I have a friend who has called me multiple times to ask for relationship advice. And I've been very I don't tell this person what to do. I usually just ask questions and tell the reason I ask the question. And I'm very assertive with this person. And if it had been a year ago, again, like you, like a year ago, it would not have worked out that way. I would have
Mhm.
been so um, unconfident in myself. And so when I take on this persona, it's more just like kind of taking on this, um, it's more like the confidence of it. Um, and stepping up to the plate. It's less shying away from the plate and stepping up to the plate, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, I think one of the things you're indirectly touching on there, and Jason and I have talked about this in the past. We just we haven't talked about it lately, but it's a seed I wanted to plant. That part of what we would help people do at Thinker is think through this constant challenge we're presented with as entrepreneurs, and as if we're bootstrapping, if we're starting up, then that means you're head of sales for your company too, right? And the problem with being head of sales as opposed to head of manufacturing or head of administration or head of accounting or, and all of that is that, through, let's say, let's just pick a random number. Let's say you're doing 50 sales calls a day. Okay, that's a lot, but let's just, or to extrapolate it, let's say you're doing 50 sales calls a week. Okay, so that's 10 a day. The problem is that no two of those sales calls will ever be identical, but some of them will be very similar and they'll appear to work, while other ones will just be a disaster, right? And I had a friend, an author, who came on my show a few years back, my podcast at the time. He asked me this brilliant question. I love the way he worded it, and he said, "One person, if you ask for the sale today, you'll never get it. And another person, if you don't ask for the sale today, you'll never get it. And do you know which one you're dealing with?" Right? It's a brilliant question because it spoke to the importance of understanding what are those archetypes, right? We all have subtle variations. It's like all as all the colors on the schemes, especially, harkening back to our past conversations, Naomi, that you ladies can see that we can't see, right? When you're picking out colors for the house, all those different shades of gray, right? Um, and it's the same with personalities, but and yet at the same time, there are core colors like purple, yellow, red, blue, green, right? And so there are core personality archetypes. And unless we make a point of studying what kind of person we're dealing with and what they're likely to respond to, we'll use the same language from one person to the next, and we'll be surprised with one person, boy, that worked out like a charm. And then we come to the next person and we use the same strategy and they go running and they don't want anything to do with us. And they weren't necessarily unqualified, or in fact, they were showing interest in doing business with us, but we scared them away. So I think if that's feeling like a healthy bridge for you to overcome that, Naomi, what I think is behind that door as you choose to walk through it is understanding those different personality archetypes and saying, okay, I'm dealing with an Enneagram 8. Okay, that's a challenger. That person wants to be stood up to in a healthy way, and they want to wrestle through why they should buy your product. So they're actually looking for a little, not antagonism, but they're looking for a little bit of healthy confrontation, healthy conflict. But the next person who comes through is an Enneagram 9. They don't want conflict at all, right? They're like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it, right? They almost
Right.
want to merge personalities with you and have you take on part of who they are so that they can get what they're after. So it's a fascinating, um, it's a rabbit hole. I'll put it to you that way. But I think
Right.
somewhere in Thinker we can begin to help people appreciate that, begin to use it in their strategy, because it makes such a big difference when you're dealing, especially with, like, you're over the phone, you can't see the person, you can hear it in their voice. Anyway, I'm curious to hear what your experience has been like with that. Ryan, what does that say to you?
Well, I think going back on like your perceived value and on confidence, um, one thing that's really important is not only how you come off when you're providing information or answering questions, but also the questions that you ask as well. I think a lot of perceived value comes from like the questions or the inquiry that's had as someone that's looking to buy something. If I'm working with somebody and let's say if I'm working with somebody on I don't know, on my house, right?
Yeah.
Let's say I'm working with a contractor and I want to add a room to my house or a floor to my house. They do that a lot here in San Francisco. And let's say that contractor comes in and they're like, "Yeah, I can do it," and they look all flashy and look successful in whatever media they have out there. Maybe they have a nice truck or they dress well or something like that. And you're talking to them, and then they start asking you questions that don't necessarily have anything to do with the project, or they're not the right questions to ask about a project that you're working on. that's where you can lose that perceived value that that person's trying to put out there, right? It really doesn't matter how they present themselves. What really matters is the questions they ask to solve the problem that you're facing, as opposed to like, say somebody who's pretty average Joe, handyman, what have you. I don't know if you heard that. Average Joe handyman, what have you. They come in there and they ask you all the right questions about what needs to be done on this project. That in itself um, um, commands value with regards to they know that person knows what to ask in order to create the solution. So I think as we talk about like confidence and knowing what your work, knowing what you're worth, and envy when we're looking at other um, entities out there that are competing with us, it's always important to know that like, am I asking the right questions of my client? Is this what they may be looking for? Um, to your point, Paul, is this client the right fit for us as well? To the effect of like potentially even rejecting the client if that doesn't seem the case. I'll tell you that it's more people will, or at least the person that you're working with will respect you enough from a rejection rather than being that person that's always like, yes, I can do that. Yes, I
Pushover.
can do that. Mhm.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's kind of where I go with it. And when you're creating product like what I'm doing, that perceived value comes in a different way. You have to show that stuff. You can't really ask these questions and things like that, but you have to show it. And that's something that Jason and I are tackling now with regards to like what are we doing with this marketing apparatus, with the marketing part of the business is like, how do we show value on something that on a product that anybody can get anywhere? How do we show value for the perceived market that we're trying to sell to? That
Mm.
that's something that we've been working through for the past couple of weeks. To say that we're, making headway is really good to know, um, but at the same time, you have to do it in a way that's really concise. Again, showing value.
Yeah.
I
But I go ahead, Naomi.
um thanks. I was as you've been talking, Ryan, I've been thinking about, and this kind of goes along with what Paul was mentioning too about the Enneagrams and personalities and how you know your value versus somebody else's and the right questions versus the wrong questions. I've always been really good at reading people, like really uncannily good at reading people. Um, and that's led to either oversharing or overstepping and criticisms of oversharing or overstepping. And so something that as I've taken on this persona and the confidence that I've gotten, I've always been good at reading people, but I have the confidence I put on is to act on how I read people. And so it can be tailored to each one. And something that I mean, and I still don't work, I'm not great, but that's kind of as I put on that persona when I like, take a breath and I can sense what they need and actually act on it instead of feeling like, oh no, I shouldn't. It's not my place. That's, instead of letting imposter syndrome be like, no, it's not your place. I'm like, no, I read this situation. This is what I read. Go with my intuition, go with my gut, act on it now, like
Mm.
being able to act on that. Um, and with Ryan, what you were saying about like the right questions, I've noticed that when people come from a place of power, almost like and this is the difference between confidence and pride is thinking you're better than other people, and confidence is knowing that you are good enough. And I think the big difference is when someone comes in and they have pride, they are not asking the right questions because they assume that you're I feel like they almost don't ask the right questions because they're not looking for they're looking for a band-aid over a bullet hole. They want to make sure that they put on this image of, I'm better than so and so. Here's why. Look, here's your band-aid. It has this pretty cool picture on it. It has, it has Marvel characters on it, so this Band-Aid is better looking than the other Band-Aids, so you're not gonna get a better deal because this Band-Aid looks cooler. It'll take care of your owie, it'll stop the bleeding, and it's everything you need. Whereas if a contractor who is not prideful, who is confident, if someone who's confident in their services, they're gonna be like, they're gonna ask questions. They're not gonna come in here and be like, "Here's my product, it's better." They're going to ask questions and actually listen because they know that they're good enough. They're not gonna be questioning that. They're not gonna have to project that they're good enough to their client. They're already gonna know that. They are
Mhm.
already gonna know that. And so they're gonna come in and they're gonna ask these questions. They're gonna listen to what the client needs. They're going to hear things out. They're gonna be like, "Okay, what do you want with this wound? Would you like stitches? Would you like me to get that bullet out? Okay, how long would you like that process to take? What do you want the end result to look like? And what color do you want your
Mhm.
Band-Aid?" Like they're going to be very, very, very thorough and they're not going to ask permission. They're not going to assume what the person wants. They're going to ask questions um, and actually listen. They're going to ask the thorough questions about what that person actually wants. And I feel like that's where that value comes in, the confidence versus pride and this whole thing with comparison and envy. I think when there's any kind of comparison at all, when we feel like we're less than or feel like someone is superior or better than us, I feel like automatically we're going to project insecurity and automatically we're not going to be asking the right questions in those conversations. But when we come from a place of, I am doing my best, I am enough, and I will bring my enough to the table and make sure that I don't let my pride get in the way of asking the right questions and hearing what I need to hear from them. I feel like that's when comparisons can kind of go away and the envy doesn't get to us as much. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah.
So, what I'm hearing in all of this, and what I think is also going to be useful, especially if we get to talking about not the envy that we deal with internally, but in fact, the envy that others are bringing into interactions with us, goes back to the principle of doing the homework ahead of time. So, Ryan, you mentioned the work you're doing on your brand, and I've had the privilege of one or two little sneak peeks at it here that Jason has just shared with me. And I think you're going down a similar positive trail as the one I've been going down when he's been helping me with mine, which is to say that the brand imagery, the avatar, the person you're attempting to talk to, there is a different caliber of human being than if you just did a shotgun approach and blasted it out there, right? You're saying anybody can buy this product, but the intended recipient is this person. And concordantly to that, we're creating a conversation that that person would want to be a part of in a very limited and abstract sense, right? It's not like you're actually engaging them one on one in real time live conversation, but your messaging says something specific to them and it leaves aside everybody else. Other people are more than welcome to buy it as we've agreed, but you're not talking to them.
Mhm.
I think that's I don't think that's an exclusionary or know, look down your nose type of thing to do. I think it's very realistic because the alternative is you muddle who you're talking to, and then you have to put on different masks to deal with those to deal with other people who come into the conversation, and you're not prepared for them
Right.
um, because you're not creating separation and bifurcation and saying this is who we'll talk to, this is what we'll say, this is who we won't talk to, and this is what we won't talk about. um, which is just, I mean, it's extraordinary what happens though, as when you take yourself through this enough times and you put in the rounds, the envy factor begins to shrink down to like a tumor that's being successfully treated. Like it's there, but it's so you get it to a point where it's so anemic it can't do anything, right? And that comes from doing the work of understanding who you are, also understanding who you're after, and by extension, empowering yourself to say, I'm sorry about everybody else. That's not who I serve. I'm open to, if people want to track me down and have a conversation, I'm open to it. But what I'm probably going to tell them is you're not a good fit. I know because I've done my homework ahead of time. And then you're not like, it's wonderfully freeing for me, right? It's like people come to me and say, well, the publishing industry does this and the publishing industry says that. And I'm like, yeah, we say screw all of that. We don't care what they say because they're doing it wrong and we know they're doing it wrong. Right? Not attacking people here, but there's a difference between how they do it, how we do it, and I can point you to what those differences are. And okay, maybe you can go online and find someone else who's doing it the way we're doing it. I'm not saying we're the only people doing it the way we're doing it. I'm saying we're one of a very limited group of people, if at all.
I
And
think there are
we've
a
done
couple
a
of points there.
Go ahead.
There's sorry, Paul, but there are a couple of points that I wanted to point out. One is that when you mention like the product that I'm working on with Jason and like where we are, and you're taking a sneak peek and having like your opinion of where we are, right? Like working in a silo, as I feel like I'm doing it right now, it's hard for me to determine where I am, right? In my business and like what the next, not necessarily what the next step is, but like looking forward to like how the product will be received once we launch, right? And when you mentioned that you were like, yeah, I took a look and I liked what I saw or whatever, I was like, oh my goodness, someone else actually took a look at this, like it kind of took me out of like the super focused viewpoint I have on my business and judging every little part about it. Just hearing you say that like you saw it and it looks, it looks promising or whatever. Um, Made me feel a little bit more confident. So that working in a silo and being able to like stick your head up and look around is really helpful for envy because when you're in a position when you're building something, all you can do is look around at stuff that's already been built,
Mhm.
right? And so it's understandable that a business owner or an entrepreneur can be envious of where other people are or where they came from or whatever. But what's really important is to know that all those other entrepreneurs started somewhere
Mhm.
and they come very far. I was just beginning to watch this other podcast about starting a social media marketing agency. And the first thing that the guy said was, I've been doing this for over 17 years. He was like, I'm going to show you all the steps on how to do this yourself. But just know that up until this point, I've already been doing this for 10 years,
Mhm.
up until when I started this business, basically. And I was like, that makes a ton of sense. It's one thing to be envious, but you also have to understand that where you are in your business is also where that competitor was in their business at one point or another.
Mhm.
And there was another point there that you made that I thought was really interesting. I can't remember it now, but it had something to do with just like being focused as well. But just staying on the point that I just talked about. I think. Oh, I remember what I wanted to say. You ever meet those people that are like quietly confident? Like it can be. What I think about is like that super like Terry Crews, for example. Are you guys familiar with Terry Crews?
The guy, the
Like
the athletic guy who does like the Old Spice
the Old
commercials?
Spice commercial. Yep.
Right.
And he
Okay.
used to
Yeah.
be like the dad in Everybody Hates Chris and all that. Anyways, he comes off as someone that's quietly confident. He's big, he's really fit, all that stuff. So you would think that he's very quietly confident. And I think what it is was that confident businesses or confident people in general don't have to advertise that, right? They know to the point of being the best or being good. Now I remember what it is. you don't necessarily have to be better than anyone else. You just have to be better than who you were before.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And being competitive with yourself and continually trying to be better than who you were in the past, I think can build that confidence the and kind of pulling you away from being envious of any competitors. And I think that's really important. Focusing on what you want to do and focusing on where your goals are. And then also not being too um what's the word? Too caught up in what you're doing to overthink where you are and thinking that you're way too far behind. Another meme that I saw recently is that successful people will always think that they're behind. Billionaires always think that they're behind somewhere, or successful people always feel like that they need to take that next step or they're gonna fall behind. That's something that I felt that I've been feeling recently is that I've been feeling like, oh, I'm so far behind, like we need to do this and where am I? And feeling lost. And then just really taking a breath and like, okay, well, working with a partner, working with Jason or working with others, they tell me that I'm not behind. So maybe I'm not, but I still feel that way. So I still am
Hmm.
motivated. And I think there are different ways in which you can take envy and worth and things like that is as a motivator. You can take all that, look around you, like, I want to be somewhere where that person's at, or I want to be like that person. All that can be motivating as long as you don't let it tax on your own self worth with regards
Yeah.
to, am I enough? Can I do this? Things like that.
I
Yeah.
love that. I had like an aha moment while you were talking. I cannot even tell you how much I love that. Because I mean, we're going to compare. We're people who do compare. But I love what you said about make sure you're comparing with who you were. As long as we're comparing and being better than who we were, we compare and try to be better than who we were and the person we want to emulate. And this is why setting goals is so important, both in business and personal life. We need to write out where we want to be and who we want to be, and instead of looking around and be like, I want to be like that person, we look at our vision board where we say, I want to be like that person. How am I going to get to be like that person?
Mm.
So, as far as like envy, be envious of your future self and take that on and become that future self and use that envy to propel you into who you want to be, as long as it's a better version of yourself. And then make sure that you're being better than who you used to be. And don't let the comparison leak out from yourself to other people. It's comparison with who you were and wanting to emulate who you want to be.
Mm.
That better version of yourself. Like I don't know, you kind of gave me that aha moment of like, as long as the comparison is with ourselves, um, and making sure that we're progressing and projecting who we want to be instead of making it look like somebody else, as long as we're making it look like us, but a more successful version. Only we can paint what that looks like. As long
Yeah.
as we are in charge of that dynamic, as we are in charge of that vision, that goal, um, instead of trying to be like somebody else, we're going to be like we're going to try to be like a better version of ourselves. And then we will be
Mhm.
better
Hmm.
than who we were. I love that.
Yep. And I love how that changed your whole vibe there.
Yeah, no, I love
um,
that so much.
I
Well,
look at it like in a couple of different ways, like one of which is like exercise and being fit. Like 2 years ago, I was like 15 pounds heavier, right? But it was very apparent in my face and in my body, things like that. And then I started working out and keeping that mantra. I just wanted to do more than I did last time or I did before. And I also, and also like wanting to be consistent, like doing it every day, like, or as many times as I can based on my schedule, things like that. It's all in the same thing. Like when you're exercising, creating a business, it's all about being consistent and it's all about being better than who you were before. Even if it's half a percent fraction better than what you were doing before is, is a win. A win is a win, right? So envy is important because as humans, we want to be the best that we are, at least in this generation, at least this era, this day and age. And the only way we can actually see that is if we look at something to compare ourselves to. And of course, there are outside influences, outside things that you can look towards. You got a Honda, you want to buy a Mercedes, you see the Mercedes, I want to be like that. But when it comes to yourself, it's all about like, how can I do better than what I was doing before? How can I lift more weight or do more or run longer m- or meet this goal, beat this deadline, things like that. And if you can keep that focus on yourself, you'll start to see how your confidence changes. You're not comparing yourself to other people. And so you're just comparing yourself to where you were before to where you are now. And that experience and that point of view really does resonate when you're talking to other people, especially if you're going back on your own experience. Um, and and exuding that in your conversations when you're asking the right questions based on your experience and what you know. Of course, you got to start somewhere and things like that. And then the answers that you get to the questions that are asked to you are even more valuable, because not only are you taking the time on yourself to be better than who you are, but you're also taking the time to ask questions of your client, your customer, or what have you, to make them feel like they're being seen. And I think that's really important.
It gives that
Now,
empathy.
Mhm.
now hanging on to that thread that both of you have just talked about, comparing only against yourself. Um, Ryan, and you talked about, popping your head up every now and then to see what's going on around you. I hope what you sense is that the guy who started this product line would not have thought to have the conversations that he's now preparing to have with the customers he never knew he was going after.
Mhm.
And the difference is, again, if we're talking about comparison, the difference here is you have opened yourself to challenging more of that hidden dimension of you in order to bring it out, in order to bring out the guy who 6 months ago wouldn't have thought to do the homework, would have just gone straight to market and shotgun blast and hope for the best, and probably crashed and burned like most businesses do, right?
Mhm.
Versus the guy now who says, no, I'm not just loading up a shotgun and firing. I'm going after a specific person. Moreover, I'm not going after them until I've asked them what it is they actually want and done research to find out why they want it and why they won't take it from Giorgio Armani or I don't know, whoever. Why they won't buy from
No,
those
yeah,
companies.
you're absolutely right. I think the smartest thing I did in starting this business was taking a step back and looking at it from a different perspective, and also utilizing other perspectives. Working with Jason and by extension, you guys, has probably been one of the more better decisions that I've made, considering that it's put me in an environment where the resources are available for me to grow. And to your point, Paul, if I had just went and 3 or 4 months ago was all like, I'm going to go buy this product, or I'm going to put it online on this platform, and we're going to make it work. To your point, it probably would have crashed and burned. Maybe it wouldn't have, but then the odds would have been stacked against me. So being able to take a step back, and utilize others for their expertise, or at least their point of view, was probably one of the more better decisions that I made in my entrepreneurial experience.
And also the values that go with that. Because what a lot of people, Jason pointed this out to me when he shared with me what you're up to. A lot of people going the route of a skincare product for men are going to try and speak to that Instagram selfie vanity boy, right?
Mhm.
Who just can't get enough attention. And obviously, there's a market for that. And yes, people pay for it. And maybe even you can make a lot of money at it. But who are you going to be dealing with when you get there?
I more
Or
be able to relate. with someone like you, Paul, with like someone like you, Naomi. Like in the case of the skincare, like someone like you got two kids, both in high school, both doing sports. You were just talking about early in our conversation how the weekend consists of ferrying them both to their appointments as well as
It's your
grocery shopping and
avatar.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. When do you actually stop to think about yourself? When do you actually stop to think about your health and how you look versus how you should be feeling and how you want to look? And
Yeah.
I feel like I relate to someone like you more so than I would relate to some 25-year-old dude who's,
All
started
about himself. Yeah.
we started like a crypto thing and got rich off of that. I can't relate to someone like that. That's somebody that I'll never relate to, but I can relate to someone like you who's built something, a family, a business, and now has the could probably have the time and at least the resource to be able to take care of themselves.
Yep.
That's who I can relate to. So that's why I'm glad I kind of stopped and strategized more, Jason, and again by extension, you guys, to create this product. And I think that we're really getting somewhere.
Yeah. Because you're changing the conversation.
Yeah. I really
Mm.
love to just add to like there's a comparison with ourselves, but then there's also the when we set that goal of who we want to be. I love that this conversation has turned towards mentorship and turned towards community. I we want to compare with ourselves where we've been and who we want to be. I guess when we grow up, if we ever grow up, I don't think we ever do. But
Oh,
or where we want to be like when we set those goals, the better version of ourselves. But it's super important to have surround ourselves with other people who have been there because a lot of times we set the goals of who we want to be and where we want to be at and what that success will look like for us. But the how is something that we can only get from other people and community and mentorship. And I think so there's that combination of mentorship and cheerleaders, which I think is what this whole community is about. And I think when we use that envy and keep it within ourselves for our past self and our future self, and build community with other people, whether it's through mentorship or getting cheerleaders, even that goes a long way. When we keep the comparison just with our future and past selves, and we turn the community towards towards those other things like the like I said, mentorship and just support in general.
Yep.
That's really
yeah,
what
I completely agree with that. I think the people who you surround yourself with are the people that you'll eventually. It's kind of like you are what you eat, right? Like
Mhm.
you surround yourself with a group of people. What do they say? You surround yourself. If you're not a millionaire and you surround yourself with millionaires, you'll likely be the next one.
Yep.
You're the
Yep.
product of the five
So
people you hang around the most.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
exactly. And so I've learned to stay home more. No, just kidding. But I very much learned that in and if any and if anything, what's really important when you're starting a business is finding someone that can either mentor you or assist you because I found out I'm finding out this year that there is nothing as a business owner and an entrepreneur that you can essentially do alone. Like
No.
there's always going to be somebody there always has to be somebody there if you want to see some sort of success. You can't work in a silo. Even artists who create like this Picasso had people around him to help him become who he is, who he was. So I think that's also super, super important. And I only started learning that recently because, well, not because, but I just remember years ago, the people I used to surround myself with, I would, if I saw them today at my age, I would be like, why would I ever want to hang out with those people?
Yep.
To your point earlier, being better than who you were before and being able to look back and just know where you came from, I think is also really important to growth and really important to growing a business even as well.
And with that, we're at our time. Pending any final words from Ryan Gard or Naomi Alstrom for the good of the order.
I'm good.
Join
No,
I feel
I
like
think this
I've
was a good
summed it up.
conversation.
Well,
So,
I thought it was great. Great to be with you guys again. Join the community at thinkergrowth.com. This has been the weekly workshop, and we'll see you next time.
right. Thanks, guys.
Well,
See you.
thanks, guys.
Bye.